What if the most dangerous weapon on Earth right now isn't a missile, a drone, or a piece of malware, but an idea? Not a bomb you can see coming, not a virus you can quarantine, but a breakthrough sitting in a university physics lab, protected by armed guards and classified paperwork, right alongside America's nuclear secrets. Sounds like science fiction. It's not. It's happening right now, and almost nobody is talking about it. For most of modern history, when governments decided something was a weapon, it looked like a weapon. A missile, a warhead, a stealth bomber. You could point to it, photograph it, count how many were sitting in a silo somewhere. Weapons were physical, visible, and unmistakably built for destruction. But over the last 2 years, something strange has been happening inside the halls of the United States government. Quietly, without a single press conference announcing it in plain language, Washington has started treating an entire field of pure science, quantum research, the same way it treats missile guidance systems, nuclear triggers, and biological weapons. Not because quantum computers can explode, not because a physicist in a lab coat is secretly building a death ray, but because the United States government has come to believe that whoever masters this technology first will hold something more powerful than any weapon ever built, the ability to see through every secret currently protecting the modern world. To understand why this is happening, you first need to understand what quantum computing actually threatens. Every secure message you send, every bank transfer you make, every piece of classified military intelligence sitting on a government server, every nuclear launch code, every satellite communication, all of it is protected by encryption. And that encryption isn't magic, it's math. Specifically, it relies on math problems that are so difficult, so mind-bendingly complex, that even the world's fastest supercomputers would need thousands of years to crack them through brute force. That difficulty is the entire foundation of digital security. It's the reason your credit card number is safe when you shop online. It's the reason spies can't casually read a country's military secrets. The math is simply too hard for any machine we've ever built. Quantum computers threaten to break that foundation completely. Instead of processing information the way a normal computer does, one bit at a time, a sufficiently powerful quantum computer can explore an enormous number of possibilities simultaneously, using strange properties of physics like superposition and entanglement. In theory, and increasingly in early practice, this means a quantum computer could solve certain types of problems. The exact problems modern encryption depends on, not in thousands of years, but in hours or even minutes. If that sounds abstract, here's the blunt version. Every secret currently protected by today's encryption standards, government secrets, financial systems, personal data, military communications, becomes readable the moment someone builds a quantum computer powerful enough to break it. Intelligence officials have a name for that moment. They call it Q-Day. Nobody knows exactly when Q-Day will arrive. There's no confirmed deadline, no ticking countdown clock broadcast to the public, but many experts inside the intelligence community believe it could happen sometime in the 2030s, and possibly sooner if a breakthrough catches everyone off guard. Now here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. Adversarial nations don't need to wait for Q-Day to start winning. Right now, today, foreign intelligence services are believed to be collecting encrypted American data and simply storing it. Communications they can't read yet. Files they can't crack yet. They're saving all of it, betting that once a quantum computer capable of breaking that encryption finally exists, they'll go back and unlock everything at once. Analysts call this strategy harvest now, decrypt later. It means the security of information being transmitted today isn't just about today's threats, it's a bet on the future. Every classified file sent over an insecure channel right now could become an open book the instant quantum computing catches up. The Pentagon has said this outright in its own strategic planning, describing insecure communications in the face of rising quantum capability as an existential threat to military operations, from the authorization of nuclear weapons down to the coordination of everyday troop movements. Think about how strange that idea really is. A weapon, in the traditional sense, does damage the moment it's used. A missile explodes, a virus spreads, but a quantum computer capable of breaking encryption doesn't need to fire a single shot to change the balance of global power. It simply needs to exist quietly in a lab somewhere, ready to be pointed at a decade's worth of stolen, stockpiled secrets. That's part of what makes this threat so difficult for governments to communicate to the public. There's no mushroom cloud to photograph, no wreckage to show on the evening news. The damage, if it comes, will be silent, instantaneous, and largely invisible until it's already too late to undo. Military planners often describe this as one of the most asymmetric threats in modern history, because a single breakthrough in one laboratory could instantly nullify decades of accumulated defensive investment by rival nations who assumed their secrets were safe simply because the math protecting them was, until that moment, unbreakable. So if the danger is this serious, what has the United States actually done about it? This is where the phrase classified as a weapon starts to make a lot more sense. In September of 2024, the Commerce Department's Bureau of Industry and Security took a major step. They added quantum computing technology to something called the Export Administration Regulations, a list the government uses to control the sale, transfer, and sharing of items considered dangerous to national security if they end up in the wrong hands. This is the exact same regulatory system historically used to control munitions, missile components, and other militarily sensitive technology. By adding quantum computing hardware, software, and even certain research materials to this list, the government effectively declared that quantum technology now belongs in the same protected category as items built for war. The details of this rule are staggering once you dig into them. 18 new classification codes were added to the government's control list specifically for quantum and related advanced technologies. These codes now cover quantum computers themselves, specialized components used to build them, certain materials required in their construction, and even the software used to operate and develop them. If a company or a university wants to export certain sophisticated quantum systems, ones that exceed specific technical thresholds for computing power and error rates, they now need government approval first. Selling this technology to the wrong country without a license isn't just frowned upon anymore. It's potentially illegal, in the same way it would be illegal to sell restricted military hardware to a sanctioned nation. But the regulations don't stop at physical exports. They also target something called deemed exports, which is a concept most people have never heard of, but which has enormous implications for research and academia. A deemed export happens when controlled technology or information is simply shared with a foreign person, even if that sharing happens entirely inside the United States. In other words, if a university lab in America is doing sensitive quantum research, and a foreign national working in that lab gains access to certain controlled technical details, that access itself can legally count as an export, even though nothing physically crossed a border. This means universities, research institutions, and private companies working on quantum technology now have to think carefully about who is allowed in the room when certain conversations happen, who can read certain documents, and who can operate certain equipment. Government agencies have specifically flagged this as an area requiring compliance review, because normal scientific collaboration, the kind that has powered decades of breakthroughs through international partnership, now runs directly into national security law. To soften the blow on legitimate scientific progress, regulators did build in some exceptions. Fundamental research conducted openly at universities was given certain carve-outs, recognizing that quantum science is, by nature, a deeply global and collaborative field, with brilliant minds contributing from countries all over the world. Officials acknowledge that American technological leadership has always depended partly on attracting and working alongside foreign talent, and quantum computing is no exception. So instead of slamming the door shut entirely, the government created narrow pathways for continued collaboration, while reserving the right to tighten restrictions further if the security risks grow. It's a careful balancing act. Lock the technology down too hard, and you risk starving American quantum research of the global talent and open collaboration that made it competitive in the first place. Leave it too open, and you risk handing your greatest strategic advantage directly to a rival power. And this expanded control didn't just affect export licenses, it also changed how foreign investment in quantum companies is treated. By formally classifying quantum computing as a critical technology under these export rules, the government simultaneously expanded the scope of a powerful review body called the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States. This committee has the authority to examine and potentially block foreign investment into American companies when that investment could threaten national security. Once quantum computing was added to the critical technology list, any foreign investor seeking a significant stake in a company developing, manufacturing, or maintaining quantum technology suddenly triggered a mandatory filing requirement. In plain terms, if a foreign entity, especially one connected to a rival government, tries to buy influence or ownership in a promising American quantum startup, the federal government now has formal authority to scrutinize that deal and potentially stop it in its tracks. This closes a door that used to be wide open, a door where a foreign competitor could simply buy their way into cutting-edge American research instead of developing it themselves. It's worth remembering how unusual this level of financial scrutiny actually is. For most of America's economic history, foreign capital was welcomed with very few strings attached, because investment was seen as a sign of confidence in the American economy, not a national security concern. Reserving the right to block a foreign purchase of a promising startup is the kind of power normally used to protect ports, airports, power grids, and defense manufacturers, the physical backbone of the country. Extending that same level of protection to a small quantum computing company that might only employ a few dozen scientists tells you exactly how seriously officials now view the stakes involved. A handful of brilliant researchers working in a converted office space with the right breakthrough could theoretically be worth more strategically than an entire conventional weapons factory. And Washington has clearly recognized that shift. Export controls and investment screening are only half the story, though. The other half involves something far more human, and in some ways, far more dramatic. espionage. The Federal Bureau of Investigation has openly stated that quantum research has become one of the most attractive targets for foreign intelligence operations anywhere in the world. And when you understand the nature of the field, it's easy to see why. Quantum research isn't spread across thousands of companies and institutions the way, say, general software development is. It's concentrated. A relatively small number of universities, national laboratories, and specialized companies are doing the vast majority of cutting-edge work. That concentration makes it an almost irresistible target. If a hostile intelligence service can infiltrate just a handful of labs, recruit just a few key researchers, or steal just a few critical files, they can potentially leapfrog years, even decades, of independent research and development. The FBI has been explicit about who it believes poses the greatest threat here. Officials have repeatedly pointed to the People's Republic of China as a nation aggressively pursuing quantum technology through both legitimate research and illicit means. According to the Bureau, this includes systematic campaigns to steal intellectual property, exploit academic partnerships, and illegally transfer sensitive technology out of American institutions and into the hands of a foreign government. This isn't a hypothetical concern floating in a policy paper somewhere. It's described by federal law enforcement as an active, ongoing, and well-resourced campaign. In response, the FBI formally established a dedicated quantum information science counterintelligence protection team. This team's entire mission is to work directly with universities, national laboratories, and private industry, helping researchers recognize when they're being targeted, helping institutions build better internal security, and working to intercept attempts at technology theft before sensitive breakthroughs ever leave American soil. Think about that for a moment. The federal government now runs a specialized counterintelligence unit whose sole job is protecting physics research, the kind of work that used to be published freely in academic journals for the entire world to read. Picture what that actually looks like on the ground. A graduate student presenting a paper at an international physics conference might now be quietly briefed beforehand about which questions to avoid answering in too much detail. A visiting researcher applying for a position at a national laboratory might face a background review that would have seemed absurd for a physics job a decade ago. A university collaborating with an overseas partner on what looks like ordinary academic work might suddenly need a compliance officer involved before the project can even begin. None of this happened by accident. It's the direct, practical result of officials deciding that the free and open exchange of scientific knowledge, the very culture that allowed quantum theory to flourish in the first place, has itself become a national security vulnerability. This brings us to one of the most significant developments in the entire story, something that happened just weeks before this video was made. In late June of 2026, the White House issued two major executive orders focused entirely on quantum technology. The first order, focused on innovation, directs the federal government to accelerate the development of quantum information science and technology for both commercial and research purposes, while working to maintain what officials call a strategic technical advantage over the rest of the world. It calls for an updated national quantum strategy, one designed to support the growing quantum ecosystem, encourage stronger partnerships with American industry, and ensure the country doesn't fall behind rival powers investing heavily in the same technology. The second executive order takes a very different tone. Instead of focusing on growth and innovation, it focuses entirely on defense. Titled around Securing the Nation Against Advanced Cryptographic Attacks, this order lays out a detailed roadmap for protecting American systems against the exact threat we discussed earlier, a quantum computer powerful enough to break modern encryption. It directs federal agencies to accelerate the transition toward quantum-resistant cryptography, sets firm deadlines for government contractors to comply with new security standards by the end of this decade, and pushes the National Institute of Standards and Technology to speed up the validation of new cryptographic systems designed to withstand a future quantum attack. Together, these two orders represent something remarkable. In the very same week, the United States government simultaneously declared quantum technology a national treasure worth protecting and expanding, and a national threat worth defending against. Its innovation and defense wrapped into a single strategic push, because in the eyes of policymakers, this technology genuinely is both. And there's more buried inside these directives that hasn't received nearly enough public attention. Reports indicate the administration is also pushing intelligence agencies to more directly protect quantum research facilities from foreign infiltration, essentially extending counterintelligence protections that once applied almost exclusively to defense contractors and nuclear facilities into the world of university science labs. There are even discussions about directing the Department of Energy and the Department of Defense to jointly build and operate a dedicated quantum computer purely for scientific research purposes, keeping the most advanced capabilities directly under government control rather than leaving them entirely in private hands. Meanwhile, the Commerce Department has reportedly been asked to explore expanding direct federal investment into promising quantum computing companies. essentially treating leading quantum startups the way the government might treat a critical defense contractor, worthy of direct financial backing to ensure they don't fall behind or get outcompeted by state-backed rivals overseas. None of this exists in a vacuum either. It sits on top of years of steady military investment and legislative groundwork. Congress has passed provision after provision inside annual defense authorization acts, directing the Pentagon to build out quantum research programs in coordination with private industry, academic institutions, and international partners. Each branch of the military has established dedicated quantum information science research centers. The Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency has been tasked with running an ambitious benchmarking initiative aimed at evaluating realistic paths toward what officials call utility-scale quantum computing, technology powerful enough to deliver genuine military advantage rather than remaining a laboratory curiosity. And the military applications go far beyond just breaking encryption. Quantum sensing, a related but distinct branch of this technology, is quietly considered one of the most disruptive military capabilities on the horizon. For decades, American military dominance has rested heavily on stealth, the ability of aircraft, submarines, and other assets to operate undetected. Quantum sensors work by detecting incredibly subtle changes in gravity, magnetism, and light at an atomic scale, changes so small that traditional detection systems simply cannot register them. In theory, sufficiently advanced quantum sensors could eventually detect stealth aircraft, submerged submarines, and hidden installations that have remained invisible to conventional radar and sonar for generations. Analysts have compared the potential impact to the introduction of radar during World War II, a single technological leap that fundamentally rewrote the rules of modern warfare. Naturally, if quantum sensing can potentially strip away the invisibility that stealth technology depends on, whichever nation masters it, first gains an enormous strategic advantage, and whichever nation falls behind risks having their most expensive, most advanced military assets rendered dangerously vulnerable. Billions of dollars poured into decades of stealth engineering could, in theory, be quietly rendered obsolete by a sensor small enough to fit on a drone, which is exactly the kind of scenario that keeps defense planners awake at night. It's worth pausing here to add some honesty and balance to this story because not everything about America's quantum push has gone smoothly. An internal Pentagon watchdog review found that military leadership itself believes truly transformative quantum computing capabilities remain somewhere between 10 and 15 years away, a timeline that stands in noticeable tension with the urgency and funding pressure coming from Congress and the White House. The same review found that the Department of Defense still lacks a fully disciplined, coordinated process for tracking how quantum breakthroughs might translate into real military applications. Different branches of the military are pursuing their own separate quantum programs without a unified national strategy tying everything together efficiently. This matters because it tells us something important about where we actually are in this story. This isn't a moment where quantum computers are already breaking encryption in secret government basements. This is a moment of aggressive, sometimes uneven preparation for a threat that experts broadly agree is coming, even if nobody can say exactly when it will arrive with certainty. In other words, the panic is real, but the machine capable of justifying that panic hasn't fully arrived yet, which gives the country a narrow closing window to actually get ready. So why does any of this matter to someone who isn't a physicist, a policymaker, or a defense contractor? Because this entire situation represents something genuinely new in how governments think about scientific knowledge itself. Throughout history, there have been a small number of moments where research crossed a line from open science into restricted knowledge. Nuclear physics became one of those fields in the years following the Manhattan Project, when the world realized that a purely theoretical understanding of atomic structure could be transformed into a weapon capable of leveling entire cities. Certain areas of biological research have crossed similar lines, becoming tightly restricted once officials recognized their potential for catastrophic misuse. Now quantum research has joined that extremely short and serious list. Not because a quantum computer can physically explode or spread disease, but because the knowledge itself, the pure understanding of how to manipulate matter at its most fundamental level, has become powerful enough to threaten global security on a massive scale, simply by making the world's secrets readable to whoever gets there first. This is also a story about the speed of technological change outpacing the speed of government policy. Encryption standards that have protected digital communication for decades were never designed with quantum computing in mind. Export control systems built for physical objects, missiles, aircraft parts, weapons components are now being awkwardly but urgently stretched to cover intangible things like software, mathematical algorithms, and even scientific ideas discussed inside a university classroom. Regulators are essentially trying to build the rules for an entirely new category of strategic technology in real time, while that technology is still being actively developed, and while rival nations are racing just as hard, or possibly harder, to get there first. Make no mistake, This is a race, whether people are watching closely or not. China's own national strategic plans explicitly identify quantum technology as a priority area for development, placing it alongside advanced semiconductors and artificial intelligence as fields the country intends to dominate. Multiple American allies, including the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Australia, Japan, and others, have implemented their own versions of quantum export controls, recognizing that this isn't a challenge the United States can manage alone. And when you have that many advanced nations independently deciding that quantum technology requires this level of protection and coordination, it tells you the concern isn't manufactured or exaggerated for political theater. It reflects a genuine shared assessment that whoever falls behind in this specific technological race may end up permanently disadvantaged in ways that are extremely difficult to reverse. Where does this leave us moving forward? Expect the restrictions around quantum research to tighten further, not loosen, as the technology matures and gets closer to real-world usability. Expect universities and research institutions to face growing compliance requirements around who they collaborate with internationally and how carefully they screen access to sensitive projects and equipment. Expect the federal government to keep pouring resources into both offense and defense simultaneously, racing to build powerful quantum systems for itself while frantically working to protect existing infrastructure from a future quantum-powered attack. And expect this quiet, largely unreported arms race to accelerate rather than fade, precisely because the stakes involved, control over the next generation of computing power, and control over the very concept of digital secrecy itself, are simply too enormous for any major power to walk away from. In the end, this entire story boils down to a single unsettling truth. The United States government looked at a field of abstract, elegant, mathematically beautiful physics research, the kind of science that has traditionally belonged to open academic journals and university lecture halls, and concluded that it now poses a threat serious enough to sit alongside missiles, warheads, and classified weapons programs. Not because quantum computers can explode, but because they threaten to make every secret currently protecting the modern world instantly readable. That is a genuinely new kind of danger, one built not from physical destruction, but from absolute, total transparency in the wrong hands. And whether most people realize it or not, the quiet, high-stakes race to control that danger and to master that power, first, is already well underway. There's a strange kind of irony sitting at the center of all this. Quantum mechanics, as a field, began as one of the purest, most curiosity-driven pursuits in the history of science. Brilliant minds trying to understand why particles behave the way they do at the smallest possible scale, with no thought of weapons, warfare, or national advantage. Now that same field has been pulled into the oldest human story there is, the struggle for power between rival nations, the fear of falling behind, the race to control something before someone else does. It happened with the atom nearly a century ago, and now it's happening again with the qubit. History has a way of repeating itself, just with smaller, stranger, and far more invisible building blocks each time. And if the pattern holds, the nation that manages to balance open scientific progress with disciplined national security, without strangling the very innovation it's trying to protect, will likely be the one still standing at the front of the pack when Q-Day finally inevitably arrives.